Okay, everybody, welcome back. Woo! In this session, we're going to take the next step and go from sort of general concept of what you want to achieve in this debate, like your sort of your vision statement or your hinge issue that you were just bringing up, and end before lunch with speech practice. Everybody is going to do either prime minister speech or leader of opposition speech, because that's the speech where you really set out your vision, right? That's where you set the whole direction for your team, where you explain to the judges what you're going to accomplish and how you're going to accomplish it and outline your case, if it's an ideal speech, right? So we're just going to practice prime minister, leader of opposition speeches at the end of this session. And then after lunch, you get to actually do the debate. So for some of you, if you were in the policy workshop, this is going to be like the 5th time you've debated this. Well, that's okay. I think there are 2 ways to learn. One is just through diversity and accumulating massive numbers of different experiences, but another way is by intense focus and just like polishing it and trying to do it better every time. I personally appreciate both ways. So tomorrow we're going to switch to a totally different issue, actually maybe even second session in the afternoon. We're going to sort of change focus, and so if you're tired of debating basic income like Daiki or, Tommy, were you in the policy workshop? Yeah, those guys, well, finally, after today, you get to sort of put it aside until maybe ICU tournament or something. Anyway, right, so because we're going to link this with the debates you have this afternoon, I want you to actually prepare in this session in your teams. After everybody's in your group, I'm going to give you a little bit more direction, a little bit sort of like review and reframing of what Shanna told you in the morning, and then I'll let you go and start preparing a speech. Not too much reframing because we want to go to lunch at 12:30, but we have lots of time still. It's only 11, so. I think it's only 11. What time is it? Yeah, it's only 11. Yeah. My watch has been inconsistent lately, so I'm never quite sure if I should trust it, but this is good. Okay, temporarily I'm going to turn this off, and actually I guess I need to turn it all the way off, otherwise it'll be blue and getting in the way. Okay, so I wrote a few words down to remind myself of what I wanted to talk about. I think if you want to really, really simplify all the things Shanna was telling you, and in parliamentary debate it's often good to simplify because you have a shorter preparation time, and if you think through like every one of the steps, sometimes it gets too complicated. You never get a chance to get your whole case made up, right? So very, very basically what happens in almost every debate is you have a problem and you have a solution, right? And if you're the government team in the debate, what is the solution? Say it louder.
The proposition.
Or I would call it not the proposition, but the resolution or motion. Right. This is also another thing. Like everybody in a different region, you have a totally different word for, sometimes it's exactly the same thing, sometimes it's not quite exactly the same thing. So it can get a bit confusing. But anyway, right. Basically what the motion or the proposition or the resolution or the topic is it's a solution to something, right? Because otherwise, why would you bother to do it? If everything's good, we don't need to do anything. We just keep things the way they are. So basically, almost every debate is a problem solution. Sort of, it's a narrative. It's a narrative with a happy ending if you're the government team. If you're the opposition team, it's a tragedy. It's like somebody did something that made things worse. That was bad. That's what we don't want to happen, right? So if you think about that, right, then the things that Shanna was telling you, like I'm not quite sure these are organized in problem-solution order, but for example, like blame. Is that part of the problem or part of the solution? Right. How about harm? Right. How about the plan? Or the plan text? Solution. How about the definition? That's all part of the solution, right? The solvency. Obviously, that's the solution, right? So you can sort of break it down like that. How about status quo? The status quo. Who doesn't know what status quo means? One person, two people, or one honest person and a bunch of liars? Okay.
Saga, you should know what it is. We learned it last week.
That's okay. He probably forgot. Too much terminology. Too many words. Status quo. Status. Situation. Quo. It's Latin, right? Quo. Now. The situation we have now. So on the government side, situation we have now, generally it's a problem. That's why we want to make our proposition or our motion. That's why we want to make the solution. On opposition side, you actually have a choice. You can say, yes, we have a problem, but this is a terrible solution. It's going to make things worse, not better. Or you can say, no, we don't have a problem. We like our society now. So you're creating a problem on government side if you want to change it, right? So opposition has those two basic choices in a debate. In the debate I heard yesterday about compulsory service, national service, government and opposition agreed that there was a problem. In some of your debates, maybe you didn't agree that there was a problem. Maybe you thought that making everybody do service would cause a problem, right? So those are different strategies you have. Anyway, that's sort of the general framework that you want to get in a debate. So like all these steps are sort of steps to get you there. And I think it's often helpful to think of this as a flow or as a narrative or as a story, because it helps you connect the different things you mention in your debate. A debate is not just a set of different arguments, like this will help women, and people can do the jobs they want, and it makes government more efficient by eliminating like 20 different welfare programs into just one basic income, right? But somehow all those things have to connect to each other some way. So that's also what Joe was telling you, where you have to have like this statement of your vision or this statement of like the hinge argument that you think you're going to win the debate on. It all sort of connects. That's what this is. You start out with a description of a status quo, the situation we have now, SQ. Status quo, which is where you think the problem is happening and what you think the problem is. So the blame, the cause of the problem, the harm, the reason why it's a problem, the significance, how much of a problem is it, right? Another word that is nice to use sometime, the urgency. Why is it urgent that we do something? Not just sort of, oh, well, basic income. Oh, it's a nice idea, very creative. Let's just try it. I think that's not usually very urgent, right? You need to have some reason why it's an urgent problem, an important problem. And so you move from there to your sort of your vision statement, your statement of what your hinge issue is. So I think like actually over here, like you guys, when Shanna asked you to read it, you had a very elegant, statement, something, I don't remember what it was. Hyoju, was that your group? Do you remember what your statement was? Like what your goal was for the debate?
Equal life. We didn't answer about the goal.
Oh no, you did. That's like I'm giving you different terminology. That's all. I'm saying the same thing Shanna said, but organizing it in a different way. Because I think to make a good prime minister speech or a good leader of opposition speech, you need to sort of have this kind of organization in your speech. That's my goal for giving you this different terminology. Does anybody who was sitting over there with Hyoju, do you remember what you read? Do you have it written down somewhere? Gayang, you have?
What did they say though?
Yeah,
I remember.
it was very elegant. It was inspiring. Nobody wrote it down? Okay, well, anyway, I had something similar. I'll just read what I wrote. It's somewhat similar. It's a little longer than what you have. Right now, people are working harder and harder just to survive. But people need to do more than just survive. They need to have a chance to achieve their dreams in life. So we need to change our paradigm of what work is. Right? So it has status quo. It has a problem. What's the problem? I'll read it again. You have to pick out these different things. You have to have the problem, and you have to have like your vision, which is part of the solution. Not a very specific part yet, but it's part of the solution. I'll read it again. Right now, people are working harder and harder just to survive. But people need to do more than just survive. They need to have a chance to achieve their dreams. So we need to change the way we think about work and labor. So what's the problem? Right. Not only that, but working harder than ever before. And it doesn't have to be so short, right? When you're setting up the problem, probably before I make this vision statement, I will probably say more about the situation. Like, what does it mean, working harder and harder? What does that mean?
More competition.
Okay, good. So that's one part of the problem. There's more competition for jobs, and
Less time with family.
people are spending less time with their family, putting in longer hours, and
Getting stressed.
more stress and more unemployment. Even though there's more competition, you're working harder and harder to do internships, to get special certificates, and you still have more trouble finding a job than before. This is a problem that is spreading throughout the developed world. In every country, we see unemployment rising, we see work hours rising, and we see real purchasing power of wages falling for the vast majority of people, everybody except the top 1%. Even though our economies are growing, the way people are working and the satisfaction they get out of their lives is becoming less and less and less. And this results in massive social dissatisfaction, which we see in all kinds of movements around the world, like the people who elected Donald Trump, like the people who vote for the National Front in France, like the right wing in Japan, Nihon Kaigi, or the strong supporters of Japanese nationalism who want their government to do something different, to make their lives more meaningful. And we see social divisions that are tearing our country apart as a result of this fundamentally unacceptable approach to the changing nature of labor. We see machines taking away more and more of the jobs that used to provide people with the basic income that they needed to care for their families and to have meaningful lives. If a government cannot provide a meaningful life for the people, that government will not survive long. So, this is the problem. Right now, people are working harder and harder just to survive, but people should not work just to survive. People should have a chance to achieve their dreams. That's why we need to do something. And we, as the government in this debate, are proposing a radical shift in the paradigm of the way we approach work in our country. We propose a universal basic income. Do you see the connections? So, then you have to get to your solution though. Universal basic income, that's just in the motion. So what does it mean? That's where you get into your plan text. That's you get into your solvency, which is essentially your arguments. Your arguments are why will this particular plan that you make actually solve those problems? And they all have to connect. So let me just give you an example of a different way that government can approach that. Because in my group in the back, we were in the back, but now he's over there, Akilan had a very different approach. He wasn't talking about Japan because he comes from India. And India has already been experimenting. But his model is actually, this is a very hard stance where you say universal basic income for everybody. His model is actually a somewhat softer stance where it's more like, it's not progressive, but it's like for a limited group, a universal basic income. So Akilan, do you want to come up and give your problem and your solution, or do you want me to just paraphrase for you? You'll come up. Okay, go ahead. Tell everybody. Just like I did, what's the problem? No, don't write it. Just tell everybody, like in a little mini speech. Like, what's the problem, and then what's your specific plan? What do you want to do?
So, as Professor in the morning mentioned about the situation of basic income being supplied to all the people, all the citizens of a nation. Like she also mentioned that Namibia and India have done similar experiments. So in my opinion, as I'm from India, and as I've been watching the situation go along for a long period of time, India is a huge nation and it would be absolutely impossible to allocate this concept of basic income for a huge population. So the Indian government has targeted an extremely small population, the college graduates. So let me give you a simple example. When we all finish our undergraduate and when we go to masters, the professors recommend us for a good master's program. What does that recommendation mean? The recommendation stands for the fact that we are good students, we are capable, and the professor has attested that we will perform well in the future. Like that, amongst the college graduates is a kind of a qualitative provision of basic income. So the professor of the college attests your application for basic income and states that you are a good student who is eligible for basic income and that you will perform well had you been given this income. So then the application is sent to the government and the government supplies you with basic income. So this has been a popular practice in a number of colleges in India. So what happens as a consequence is these young people get cash and they're motivated to achieve their own dreams. But the government places many conditions for students. These conditions are not upon how the youth should spend their cash, but upon what they should do if they succeed with their cash. So these entrepreneurs don't become technical giants like what we see in Silicon Valley, but what happens is these young people who succeed are given the duty to become an entrepreneur of some sort which can engage poor people to function. For example, traditional activities, pottery, something. So if this young guy who's just graduated from a business school becomes a good businessman in pottery works, he could get pots from an extremely poor pottery community and he could sell it in the US for a higher price or Europe for a higher price. So these kind of things. So it doesn't necessarily have to be a good software or something which is really innovative. It could just be something which is already existing out there. Just take it and place it at a higher level. Textiles, fabric, other kinds of small stuff, even agriculture like jute bags, other kind of simple stuff. The most successful application of this kind of basic income in India was jute bags. So yeah, but there are many applications. So this is what I mentioned to Professor. It could be for a limited group rather than a quantitative analysis of just spreading out the income, for millionaires, poor people. It could be an extremely focused qualitative distribution meant to uplift the people who are capable of spending the cash in a proper fashion. So
I'm sold. That sounds
Okay, before you sit down, I think that was brilliant, and it's like really supplementing the examples we heard in Shanna's lecture in the morning, which is an extremely valuable contribution.
Yeah.
But I want to organize it a little bit so other people can use it in their speech. So what exactly is the problem we have right now? Like, why did the government start this policy in India?
because a lot of college graduates end up becoming taxi drivers and other jobs for which they are extremely underqualified.
Okay, excellent. Right. So, everybody in the audience, is that the same problem or a different problem than I talked about?
It's different.
Well, it's the same on some fundamental level, like on a very principle, on the level of principle, if people, should like maximize their potential or achieve their dream, yes, it's the same.
Yeah,
But it's a very, very different,
stance.
right, it's a very different context, it's looking at a more different specific problem, that the resources that we have, our national resources, our best national resource is like our educated youth. The youth who have already shown potential, but then society doesn't offer them any chance to use that. So society loses, they lose, that's your problem, right?
Yeah.
Right. So to make that problem solved, then this is like what Akilan gave you is not just his vision, but also more like his specific model of how it would work. If you're doing this in a broad debate, what you say is like, we think other countries should adopt the Indian model. This is what it is, and then you explain like that. Like it's very, like one good way to explain your definition or your model is just to say, we're going to do it like this country did it, but we're going to expand it. Like in India, maybe it's been limited. We think India should expand this to like all college graduates with a GPA of over 2.5. Or we think, other developing countries should adopt the Indian model because this is going to be the engine for their future growth if we can really take advantage of the potential of our best graduates, something like that. Okay?
Yeah.
Would you like to add anything?
Well, nothing, but as you mentioned, like the one most important point which keeps coming up is this concept of softer stance. Like for example, this debate which you've been doing until now, for the extreme cases, for the unemployed people being given basic income. So it comes up to the ultimate point, if those people are actually capable of using this cash for productive work, for finding a new job, or if these people would spend the cash, taking rest at home. So that's an extremely hard stance. A softer stance would be the case wherein people are not given the desired amount of respect which they're supposed to be given for their qualifications or for their capacity. So the case for the softer stance would be to exploit the talents of a person. So you evaluate a person, you qualitatively judge his capacity, his needs, and then decide upon the amount of basic income which can be supplied to him. So that might be the one thing which I have to add.
Okay. Here. Right, we have an extra professor here. But okay, so yeah, I think the question though is, it really is what your vision is. Like Akilan has his vision. I have my vision. I don't think one is better or worse than the other, but you need to connect them. That's the point. You need to connect what you think the situation is now, what you think the problem is, with your vision for a solution. So there's a guy named Sandeep from, where is he from? Singapore? Hong Kong? Singapore, I think. Who drew some graphs. Like, basically, this is what a hard stance looks like. You have the problem, and then you have the solution. In a hard stance, when you're taking a hard stance, what you're saying is that you have a really big problem. And so how about your solution? What should your solution look like? Like, this is just like, let's just say it's percent. How much of a problem could you have? 100% problem or 0% problem, right? So if this is a big problem, where should my solution be? Should it be little, medium, big? Big, right? If you have a big problem, you need a big solution. So if it's a problem affecting the basic way, like in my speech, the basic way where everybody in Japan is either they have a job, but they're working harder and harder and harder just to keep where they are. They're not making any progress. Maybe they're even losing a little bit, like having to work extra time, but losing time with their family, losing time for their hobbies just to get the same amount of money. Or they're not even getting a job. So everybody's affected. So if everybody's affected, should I only give a basic income to college graduates with a GPA over 2.5? Yes, no? If the whole society is affected, should I just focus on a small group? Probably no. There's no definite answer. Probably no. Like, I can sort of try to combine Akelen's plan and say, okay, well, if we want to change our economy, we actually have to make a more innovative economy. Who's going to make the innovation? It's going to be the college graduates with high grades. Therefore, we help this small group today, but in the future, in a better economy, everyone will benefit. But it makes your argument more complicated. If you have a problem that affects everybody, it's probably better to have a solution that affects everybody. Just give everybody a universal basic income. If you have a soft stance, it's like your problem doesn't affect everybody. It's certainly important. If you have a problem that affects 0% or 1%, you don't have a debate. But if you say, like, 50%, let's just say, like, it's probably not 50, but some big percent, well, then your solution also should match in size. So if the biggest problem is that we're investing all this money and effort in educating people, but we're not getting any return, and they're not even getting a return for their own education, well, the solution should target the problem. In policy debate, right, where you study the same motion for a long time, it's easier to get a direct match. But the general principle that you should have sort of a problem that matches the solution, or a solution that matches the problem, applies to any kind of debate. So, going back to this stuff I was talking about, in making your speech, well, it's really in your preparation time in setting up your case, you want to think about all those steps and how they connect, how your problem and your solution connect. And in the prime minister's speech, or the leader of opposition speech, that's where you need to set out this flow, this vision of how you get from the problem to the solution. I'll talk about opposition in just a second. So, one thing left over, the definition, the model, the policy, the plan text. I think in policy debating, maybe it's even a rule where you break down, like, you give the definition of each word, and then you give your plan text, and then you give any extra conditions and whatever, right? In parliamentary debate, there's not really a rule that you have to separately define words and then give a plan text and all that. But you need to give people an understanding of how you're going to do it, right? How and when and who. So I'm not really going to add a lot more, but just to finish sort of from where I left off in my speech, Akelen gave us a really detailed explanation of his model. I would say, so because everyone should not just be working to survive. We should be working to achieve our dreams. Therefore, we will institute a universal basic income in Japan, and we think other developed countries should do the same thing. Just to be specific about our model, this income would provide everybody with an amount of money, every adult, with an amount of money equal to the poverty line, as determined by how much money is needed to provide for basic food, clothing, and shelter, plus 5%. That's our model. We would, at the same time, eliminate almost all other welfare programs. The only welfare programs we would keep would be very special programs for very special segments of the population, like disabled people who might need like special education or rehabilitation, or say hospice for terminally ill people who might need special care. But other than that, out of their basic income, people are expected to pay for food, clothing, shelter, education, etc. If people have a job, of course, they can earn more and use that however they want as well. So that would be how I would explain. And then I go to my arguments. So what will be the benefits of the arguments? Like, what will be the benefits of this plan? And I haven't actually organized arguments in my head, but because we talked about this a lot, I'm sure you can suggest some very specific benefits. What's one benefit?
Carefree life.
Okay, good. Like a carefree life, I no longer have to worry about surviving. Instead, I can start actually planning for my future or deciding what I want to do. What else? Closer family relationships, right? Maybe more social like better civic culture, right? More political participation, less like worry that, oh, immigrants are taking our jobs, or you know, oh, like the rich people are like oppressing the poor people, because everyone feels more secure, everyone feels more like higher level of political discourse, something like that. Those would be key benefits. How about helping women? You could add that too. I think that's probably a secondary effect, because again, if you look at the graph, right, women are only part of society, but my goal is big. I want to change all of society.
Could stimulate the economy.
Stimulate the economy, right. So these are your supporting arguments. And every time you make an argument, you can say, so this is how it will then change, how it will help solve this problem that we have now. You should link back to your problem, right, for every argument. So what about opposition then? Like the fundamental philosophy of government under my case, right, is that we should change the way we think about work. Work shouldn't be something you do on your own to survive. The government should guarantee that everybody, you know, survives at least some level of comfort. People should be free to pursue their own dreams. And we just started in Shanna's lecture talking about opposition, but opposition needs to have the same thing. Opposition doesn't give a specific definition, but opposition also needs to have their idea of what is status quo. They need to know, like, you have two choices. Do you like it? Or do you not like it? But think the plan is bad. So, what do you think from opposition? In Japan now, do you think Japan has a good society? If you're in opposition to this motion, maybe yes. In opposition, this is just an example. You might start out, let's just say we like the status quo in Japan. You say, like, let's look at, like, government team has a very narrow sense of what a good life is. Government team is arguing from a very privileged point of view that everyone should be some kind of cultural elite that doesn't have to work if they don't want to and can just devote themselves to their dreams. Like, when in history has any society ever provided this to anybody? If we think about history, like, the situation in Japan now is actually pretty good. Yes, people are unemployed, but we have welfare systems to support them. Yes, people might have to work harder in their jobs, but is that something that the government is forcing them to do, or is that their choice because they just want more things, like a fancier car, or a bigger house, or a nicer TV, or the latest iPhone, like the same day it comes out? Like, you know, is the government responsible for doing away with people's greed, or doing away with people's desire to compete with each other? Is the government responsible for making people happy? No. We on opposition say that our society actually gives us a pretty good life right now, and we're happy with what Japan has done and is doing. Yes, there's unemployment, but we see some changes in the economy now. We've got less regulation. We on opposition support the model we have now, a capitalist meritocracy where every individual is responsible for themselves. The government is not responsible for your happiness. You are responsible for your happiness. All the government needs to do is, like, take care of your basic welfare and make sure you don't starve. And we already have programs that do that. So we in opposition want a society where individuals are actually responsible for making their dreams if they have their dreams. Not that the government is going to somehow offer them like these conditions. And we think, like, specifically that the government plan of basic income will have several problems. And then you go to your opposition arguments, right? So what are your arguments from opposition? You think hurt the economy, not help the economy. You think what else? Make people dependent on government for their happiness rather than, like, trying to work harder for themselves. Like, if I think an iPhone or something is important, well, I should work harder for that. What's wrong with that? If I don't have a job, because I'm not as good as that other person who worked harder, that person should get the job, not me. Like, we destroy the idea of a meritocracy under the government plan, right? So I think that's how opposition approaches the same debate. I think under Öcalan's plan, I'm not quite sure how opposition would approach that because he has a more limited plan, right? He's not basically changing the nature of society, he's just focusing on one segment. So I think he has to probably, his opposition might have a different goal. Like, again, I haven't planned this, just thinking off the top of my head from many debates I've been in the past. I think, oh, Tommy, go ahead, you first.
But you can attack the workability, because I was thinking that maybe, given that there are many corrupt politicians and, like, let's say professors also, then what is the point in giving, like, say, having approved of those, some of those people, like, from those professors, like documents or something like that?
Well, that's a good point. That's not the core of what I was thinking, but it would fit very well with what I was thinking, which is that you're choosing the wrong target. That by picking relatively privileged people, like people who are already relatively privileged, like if you're a university graduate and you have to settle for a job as a taxi driver, that still puts you better off than half the population of India that is in like a rural village with no sanitation, no education, right? Like, they're picking the wrong target. If they really want to help the society, if they really want to make it a better society, they have to start with the people who have the least. You know, this is actually, I think this is how the political parties in India pretty much like divide themselves, right? You have like sort of the populist left, which, you know, wants to like work for the bottom, and then you have like sort of like the more, you know, sort of internationalist, globalist, like technocrats, right, who want to work from the top, right? Is that right?
There are more divisions than that.
Right. It's more complicated, obviously, but you know.
These are the major ones.
Right. This is like a major division, right? It's a major division in a lot of countries. So that would, and then so we can say, like, along with that, Tommy's argument that if we start assigning, you know, this basic income to the people who are already recommended by their professors, these are people who already are elite. The very fact they got into college may mean they're participating in a corrupt system where they may have bribed their way in, or they may have taken advantage of family ties or something. That whole system that has all the problems it has now is just going to be made worse. That the people who don't deserve it are going to get it. That it doesn't reward individual initiative. That it, in fact, like just provides people with like almost like a comfortable cushion where, oh, if I want to innovate and I happen to be successful, good, the government's supporting me, and then I maybe have to pay back some to the government afterwards. But, you know, like if I don't want to, I don't have to. So the lazy people, automatically, you're giving them even less motivation than status quo. And then even the ones that do try to succeed, but if they fail, like, it's like, oh, no big problem. So moral hazard, you're going to make people like throw their money into like all these kinds of risky, crazy investments, you know, just like the banks before the banking crisis and subprime mortgages, and, you know, so it's totally the wrong target. What we should do is like pay cash payments to all the really poor people who are going to use it for things they really need, like, you know, maybe building a school in their village, or like, you know, having sanitation so they're not going to be like sick every time they have to drink polluted water, and then, you know, that's going to help our economy better, right? That would be how that opposition works. So, okay, so I'm going to wrap up. My main point is you need to have a vision of what you think the problem is now, or the lack of problem, and you need to have a vision of how your solution works as a whole, and you need to connect all the different arguments together, not just have scattered arguments. Like, this is ideal. Like, you can have a few unconnected arguments too, but those arguments should sort of be like second speaker arguments that you do at the end of your case. You could have, oh, by the way, and there's an additional benefit. Like, if Japan does universal basic income first, you know, it can provide a model for the rest of the world, and that will increase its international diplomatic status. That's an argument, but it's not an important argument. It's not related to the basic problem, right? Or, and in India, you know, if we institute this problem, the fact that there is like this requirement to pay back to the state, that's helping us like make the elite, cultural elites more responsible to the nation as a whole. Actually, that is closely related, at least to the opposition case, the way I gave it. But those are like second speaker arguments, additional extra arguments. Okay, right. I guess maybe the one thing I haven't addressed on this is, suppose you don't like the situation now. Suppose you agree with the government about that. But you think the plan's going to be bad, right? So in the India case, actually, I think we agree. Like, we don't like the situation now. But we have a different plan. We're going to address the poorest people, not address the college graduates, right? In the Japan case, what if you don't like? What if you agree? Yes, everyone's more stressed than they used to be. Unemployment is a big problem. We absolutely agree, right? Well, again, usually what you need to say then is you need to say, like, there's a different way to do things that will work better, and we can't do them together. So in basic income, it's easy, because basic income is going to take so many resources, probably you can't do other things if you do basic income. So that's easy for opposition then. You can say, well, we'll take all that money we're going to give for basic income. If we're going to use this much money to change our society anyway, right? We should probably use it in a different way. Like, let's do it, like, even like Akilan's plan could be the opposition's plan in this case. If government has a very hard plan, this is like the disadvantage of a hard stance. If government has a hard stance and you're doing a lot, actually this soft stance, opposition can take that. If government says we want universal basic income, or if the motion says that, then that's government. Opposition is allowed to say we want partial basic income. So this can even become an opposition argument if the government is hard enough. If government sort of like, oh, universal, well, we mean partial, then opposition can't do this anymore, right? Then opposition has to say no basic income at all. Okay? All right, any questions? No. All right, you're in your teams. Just to remind you, I'm going to put those teams up again so you know which side is government and which side is opposition. Basically, the same thing. The motion is like this house would... What was the motion for policy debating in Japan? Did it say specifically?
Yeah.
Okay, this house would implement...
Or adopt universal basic income for all Japanese.
All Japanese. Okay. Ready. So that's the motion. I'll circle it in a different color. This house would adopt universal basic income for all Japanese is the motion. As soon as the slide goes on, it will show you which side you're on. Can you all see that? Right. If you already like did the policy debating, you may even have a case all prepared. In which case, like be the expert, like help out. Don't just tell everybody your case to start with, though. Like let them talk about it a little bit, but then sort of help them out if there's a difficult point. Right. I'm not even, just so you, so if you're in Brownie, you're government. If you're in Millefeuille, you're government. Pudding, Mont Blanc, and Eclair, we're all government. And Cookie, Rusk, Parfait, Dart, and Dango, all opposition. Your job is for 30 minutes to make a case. Case starting with like what you think of the status quo. Do you like it or not like it on opposition side? And then if you don't like it, what do you think is the best way to change it that's different from the government plan? If you're government, why don't you like it? What's the cause of the problem? Who do you blame? And then how is the motion going to help solve that cause? And then what are your specific arguments, right? So all those things we just were talking about and practicing, do that. After 30 minutes, everybody on government is going to be a prime minister. So everybody has to give a first speech. If you have 5 arguments for your team, do the split. Okay, I'm going to talk about this argument, and this argument. My deputy will talk about those 2, and then don't talk about those 2 in your speech. Just list them at the beginning, right? Just give the outline. And then talk about your 3 arguments, or your 2 arguments, or however many arguments you have as the prime minister. If you're leader of opposition, same thing. I'm going to talk, we have 4 arguments, or we have 5 arguments, or 3 arguments, or whatever. I will talk about this one after I rebut the opposition's or the government's case. And my deputy will talk about those two. Well, then don't talk about the deputies. You're just doing a first speech, everybody. You will pair up with somebody from the other team. So like, my team is Mont Blanc. Like if I'm Mont Blanc Prime Minister number 3, I'm going to get together with Tart, Leader of Opposition number 3. We're going to stand here like if Yasu, what's your team?
Cookie.
You're Cookie, you're not Tart. Who's Tart? Tart. All right, everybody stop. We're going to give you a bonus 2 minutes just in case, but listen very carefully because I already had one question from my own group and one question from this group. And so I'm going to ask you, do you do a deputy speech? Yes or no?
No.
Good. So how many people in your group should do the first speech, the Prime Minister?
All of us.
Good. How many, or if you're opposition, how many people should do Leader of Opposition?
All of them.
All of you. All of you are doing the same speech. Are you going to be listening to each other?
No.
No, you're going to be a partner with somebody from the other side.
So for example,
All of you will have your own partner, your own individual partner.
So for example, Rio will be debating with, is it Gak?
I don't know, just in your group, everybody say like, or actually we could just use that. Like the person in column B in your team debates the person in column B in the other team.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's good. Okay, that's good. We'll just do it that way.
Except we can't see
There are
the
a few
actual pairings.
switches, but
Yeah. I couldn't get it to. Oh, there.
You can shrink it, yeah.
Yeah, it wasn't shrinking for me for some
Yeah, you
reason.
don't know how to do it.
I don't do computers.
So we're against Dongo.
okay. So if you're debater 1 in Brownie, your partner will be debater 1 in Cookie.
Okay? Yeah.
If you're debater 1 in Millefeuille, your partner will be debater 1 in Rusk. If you're debater 2 in Millefeuille, your partner will be debater 2 in Rusk, etc., etc. If you're an extra debater, I think it's Mizuki and Soichiro, right? You two are the extras, so you guys are also partners against each other, okay? All right, you have 3 more minutes on my stopwatch. As soon as I find my stopwatch, 3 more minutes, and then everybody. Okay, everybody, stop.
Oh, thank you.
First of all, if you haven't already done so, please shake your partner's hand and thank her or him for a good debate. Thank you again. Secondly, I hope it really was a good debate, but even if it wasn't, like, you know, it's extra practice, but my partner did really well. Like, I'm very proud of her. It's her 3rd time ever giving a speech. I saw her first speech 4 days ago on Friday. She spoke for 3 minutes, was very scared. This time, she spoke for almost 6 minutes, 5:42. Very organized, nice introduction. I asked 2 POIs in her speech. One of them she answered well, the other one not so well, but you know, like I think for someone who just gave 3 speeches, like I'm very satisfied. So I hope you had similar feelings, like nobody does anything perfectly. My weak point, I think, is I spent too much time on my introduction, and my second argument I was supposed to make didn't have a lot of detail. That usually happens to me. I always spend too much time on something and never quite finish everything I wanted to do. Unless I'm lucky. Once in a while I get it just right, but anyway. So, you know, think about that. Think about, like, personally, like, what am I very happy with? What am I not so happy with? Because you're going to do the full debate after lunch. 3 speeches plus reply speeches. So if you really liked your speech, maybe you want to be Prime Minister or Leader of Opposition again. If you thought, oh, well, you know, that was okay, but I didn't, you know, like it that much, well, maybe you still want, maybe you want another chance. Like, it's up to you. When we do the afternoon debate, only one of you can be Prime Minister or LO, right? The other ones have to be the second speaker, the third speaker. So after lunch, we'll give you a little bit of extra prep time. We might shrink it down just a little bit, like 25 minutes instead of 30, because you already prepped a lot with your team, maybe just 20 even. So that's our plan, right?